part in when that discussion was had,
I can't make any comment on that because I wasn't here and I wouldn't make it because.
is that in regards to the land that's part of the Agritas project, or could I have some information on that?
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Through you, Mr Deputy Mayor, the circumstances, council has an ongoing lease and it has for a substantial period of time for a small parcel of land that is an unused recreation reserve at the moment. It is leased for grazing purposes. Council may consider to change that or review that in some time in the future.
So is it part of the 20 hectare block that's in the Agritas development for Duck River Meadows, or is it a different piece of land?
That particular parcel of land was considered and is included in the development application, but that could change depending on the will of council at any particular point in time.
So that's the one that runs alongside the schools and along Grant Street.
That is correct.
So would I have to have any more particulars about that in regards to that lease, or when it began, or how long it goes for, or what it's for? Or...
I understand the question. That those particular documents are commercial in confidence with the particular arrangements around that lease. No different to any other lease that council has with any other person in the community. But in terms of considering that, as I mentioned before, council may review that and consider that document at some later stage.
Okay, no worries. Thank you very much.
Any further questions?
Bevan Anderson from Montague. In terms of the meeting with Council and Montague Marriwal community members regarding the Jims Plains and Wellens info development, I was instructed to prepare questions and answers. Questions for answers. Can I speak directly to the person who answered my questions on that particular night? Because as far as what I can see from the sheet of paper that was given, a lot of the answers were auto made and generated. So, and a lot of them were all exactly the same. So I don't understand how you can actually put a question forward and have about 6 or 8 or 10 auto-generated answers for the same thing.
Well, if the question was the same or very similar question, obviously the answer would be the same.
The questions weren't all the same. That's what I'm getting at.
I said all similar, and my understanding is that there were a number of questions all related to a similar question, and so obviously if it was a similar question, the answer would be the same.
What about the questions that weren't even answered?
I'm not aware that there was questions that
Yes, there was.
Well, we need to take that on notice, and
Through you, Mr Mayor, I would welcome to take that on notice because of the questions that were provided.
That's not for me to actually ask that, it's the person that actually asked the question. And he's not here tonight. Right, so it's up to him to actually get in contact, I realise that, but there was questions that wasn't even answered in that meeting.
did they definitely get to council?
Yes, they did.
I couldn't answer that, but we can check it out. And
Certainly can, yeah.
you can let us know whose questions they were so we can get it right. That's fine.
So can I speak to the person directly that answered my questions? Because I don't think I was answered in full.
I'm not sure exactly who answered your questions.
Can I find that out, please?
Through you, Mr Mayor, the questions were circulated to a number of the staff and responses compiled. I'd have to take that on notice and know which particular questions they are.
So no one knows who actually answered what?
Through you, Mr Mayor, the circumstances are that the questions were forwarded to a number of team members based upon their expertise. I would have to go back and look at those questions and see which ones are of particular concern to yourself, and then check with who responded to those.
Would you like me to actually read them out?
Yeah, I'm happy to
Okay.
receive those.
What will be the impacts of the area for the proposed Robbins Island Wind Farm project, including the detailed analysis of residential and rural property values alongside the health and the well-being of the residents? Who answered that?
I don't think we'll take that now, but we'll get back to you with an answer for it.
Okay, second one. Will council be commissioned an independent assessment of property values in the area pre-development and post-development to ensure that the financial well-being of the residents and ratepayers? Who answered that one?
Again, we'll
Take
get
that
back to
one
you.
on us, yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions?
Kim Anderson from Montague. The council meeting on the 18th of June, amendment was added to James Plains Wind Farm when it was approved, which was 1500 megawatt. I attended the UPC meeting 22nd of July. David Compton told me it was 750 megawatt plus 250 megawatt for land, care, schools, etc. But both were voluntary and the poster on the wall stating that. The general manager also at the UPC meeting told me it wasn't not enforceable and had to be negotiated. 25th of July, an advocate, David Pollington, stated 375,000 on community fund. 150 megawatts James Plains, 350 megawatt Robbins Island, first stage. 500 times 750 is 375,000. What is in this circular head if the community fund is not enforceable and you can't agree on a dollar amount?
Well, we've still got some discussions to have with, obviously, with UPC.
But you passed James Plains with that stating that that was the amendment.
We stated that that was a note in the amendment, and notes are what we really want out of them, but it isn't enforceable.
It was definitely a note.
It was definitely a note.
Alright. Could I see that printed out, please, after sometime this week, tomorrow or something then?
Well, it's in the minutes, so,
Alright.
and you can get a copy of those, that's right.
But also, you haven't answered the question, what's in it for circular head?
Well,
If it's
that's,
not enforceable, if nothing's not enforceable.
well, we're going to still have further discussions with it, and we expect that they'll be paying a certain amount, and we still hope that they'll pay that 750 per meg.
But you can say, anyone can say words, but what about a contract?
But that's all we can do in the, that's all we could do, and so we're trying to get the best deal possible for the residents of
Well, on the
Circular Head.
mainland, I can't say the wind farm, but, they've actually got a contract that's 75,000 a year, which is divided between 6 clubs, and it actually gets carried on every time the wind farm's sold. So it's been sold 4 times, twice while, DAs and everything was going on. Third time was when the wind farm was built, and now the 4th owner. So how come they can have a contract and certain people can't?
I'm not sure on that, to be quite honest, I'm not sure whether you can give us a light and set him on that.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In terms of enforceable provisions, if there's a separate agreement reached and both parties agree to that being enforceable, that is where it sits. In terms of the circumstances where council has communicated in a public forum the expectations on behalf of community, that situation has been recorded as a note in the development approval. You are correct in stating that the circumstances are that it's to be negotiated, it's an agreement to be struck. But that's an ongoing conversation with the proponent based upon a further set of negotiations with council.
Well, he actually stood fair in front of me and said, Kim, it's voluntary. Voluntary.
So it's not enforceable.
Not enforceable. David Collington said that.
In terms of participation under the renewable energy charter, they are encouraged to have agreements with communities, and as you raised, that can be materialised into a formal agreement. But in terms of the circumstances, that conversation hasn't been completed, and the proponent's probably correct in terms of telling you that it's not enforceable at the moment because an agreement hasn't been filed.
So can I ask the question, when will the work be done before Robbins Island is passed by the council?
Through you, Mr Mayor, the circumstances are that's an ongoing conversation with the proponent.
Yeah, that didn't answer the question, though, will it be finalised before Robbins Island is passed?
In terms of the dynamics, it would depend upon the engagement with the proponent. If we are in a process of talking to them at this point in time, it may well be finished, it may not.
I wouldn't like to do my good work. How long has the council had the Robbins Island DA?
We haven't got it at this stage.
Through you, Mr Mayor, the application is lodged, but it hasn't been on public exhibition.
And the council's actually got it though.
No, the councillors have not seen the application.
On the
at this-
12th of August, Madeline Skerritt, I think her last name is, from UPC rang me and told me that the council's had it for 31 days. They've got 42 days. So you've got 9, that's 11 days left. So
Right.
who's
Who's telling you?
telling the truth?
Through you, Mr Mayor, let me explain. The organisation council has received the development application. The contents of that application have not been shared with elected members yet because the report hasn't been finished. We haven't even got sign off from the EPA in relation to being able to publicly exhibit that application for community's comment, and the time elapsed for that comment to actually be received and processed. So it is correct to say that council has the application, but with due respect to all elected members, they have not seen it because it's not prepared in a report to actually be in front of council to consider.
So she was telling me that the council had it to make feedback, so who makes the feedback on that?
Through you, Mr Mayor, the conversation is the assessment team on behalf of the organisation goes through their statutory process to review that application. That includes referrals to state agencies and the like, and we have to get sign off from the EPA in particular before the document can be publicly exhibited.
So no one cited it in the last 30 odd days in the council.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I'm sure that the assessment team has been working on it every day in that space.
The council said assessment team.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions?
No,
Hi, I'm Colin Murphy. Are the councillor and councillors aware of the Victorian Supreme Court decision handed down Tuesday, which found in favour of landholders in South Gippsland Council versus the Bald Hills Wind Farm? This case came about after repeated complaints to council of noise and health problems arising due to the noise emanating from the wind farm were not investigated. Council were forced by another court to conduct an independent acoustic study at a cost of $33,000 after failing to do this previously. To quote the South Gippsland Shire Council's Chair Administrator, Mr Essenvine, on Tuesday's verdict, as it currently stands, wind farm operators may be complying with their obligations under the Planning and Environment Act, but not the nuisance provisions of the Public Health and Wellbeing Act. We believe that this is something that statutory authorities need to resolve to avoid the situation that has occurred in South Gippsland happening elsewhere, said Mrs Eisenbeis. The towers in question in this case are much smaller than the proposed 270 metre heights of Robbins Island. There are also only 52 turbines spread out as opposed to Robbins Island, which was proposed well over 100 towers. Research and modelling tells us bigger towers make more noise and more towers together make more noise. How can council consider granting planning permits to this project, knowing the very real risk of noise to adjoining properties may suffice a nuisance? The cost will be shouldered by ratepayers to do the necessary audits arising from complaints. It's not enough to defer responsibility to the EPA when it will be council paying for the audits required and legal action required on arising noise complaints. The Supreme Court decision and civil cases following it show us that wind farms should not be placed near communities. We have lots of wind and lots of space. What we do seem to have is proper planning and governance on where to place the wind farms. And my question is, beyond this, we're being made an experiment. These have never been put on land before. So if they're already causing this much trouble with smaller turbines, is council taking this into consideration in the planning?
I'm not aware of that at all, so we'll probably need to check it out. And, yeah, but I'm not news to me.
Well, I know there's been no wind noise things done from my property, and I'm right in view and one of the closest people there.
There's only been 3 done, one at, Percy's, Parksville Road and 2 at Montague.
We just got one person asking questions at all.
Yeah, well, I just know that they've never come and done, they said they were going to, they've never done it. And these turbines, we're being made an experiment of, and the council prepared for the consequences of the probable or possible health effects and whatever they're going to do.
Have you talked to UPC about it?
Yeah,
And what's their answer?
oh, the same as everything, oh, we don't know what size it's going to be, we don't know how many yet. It could be, it might not be. I mean, we've had nothing solid. I've been going to over 2.5 years to all of these meetings, except for the last ones, and never have I been given the same answer twice.
Okay, well, we can ask them on behalf of the people there, and we can certainly do that. Any further questions? If not, we'll move right along to 10.1, and we are now, as part of the agenda, is for council acting as a planning authority to consider applications against the terms of planning scheme in force. And so, Councillor, saying if that is first or? Ashley, thank you. Go through the report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Fortunately, my iPad has seems to work on me, so I'm just going by what I can see on the screen and from memory. We have an application to convert some existing structures on a property into a dwelling, and then also an ancillary dwelling at 348 Kingdom Road. Thank you. A plethora of information overload. Yeah, so an application for essentially residential use on a rural resource zone block. It has been assessed and deemed to not comply with all the requirements of the scheme. Principally, there is a nearby, a couple of quarries nearby. They don't meet the required prescribed setbacks to that quarry, which is a kilometre, as blasting does happen at the quarries. Instead, the setback is approximately 100 metres from the edge of the mining lease. There's been no argument or representation put forward as to how they can minimise potential impact of the new dwelling in relationship to the quarries. Additionally, to the north of the property is also forestry block, and they do not meet the prescribed setback to the forestry. And again, there's been no mention of any amelioration, so that they would not have impact on the forestry practices to the north. Given that there are these fairly severe constraints to the north and the south, there's also limited to no opportunity to relocate the residential use anywhere else on the property, as there would still be likely constraint and interference to the operations of the quarry and the forestry. Given it's a rural resource zone, the resources are given preference over any residential use. And as per the objectives of the zone, residential use can be approved within that zone, provided it does not conflict or interfere with primary industry developments. In this case, it's quite clear that it will. That's much as I'll provide. Any questions from the councillors with regards to this application?
Thank you. Any questions?
Mr. Mayor, I've got a question. It's on page 2 of 7 of the planning report. and it refers to clause 26.43, and that talks about the location. And I just have a question, Ashley, as far as the existing residence to what I believe is the west. That existing residence, when that was built, that residence there, because I see the location of the quarry from a distance point of view is the same distance. So how did you come to the resolution?
Yeah, so there has been assessment of nearby other dwellings to the quarry and the subject site as well. We've looked at the approvals of those, and they are all 2009 or prior to that. So obviously prior planning rules applied at the time. Our Director of Infrastructure Services provides a good analogy that certain days you didn't have to wear a seatbelt in the car, you do now. So new rules do apply, particularly since the power policy was introduced in 2009 to protect resources. There's been a lot more stringent rules put into planning schemes to protect resources from residential use.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you. Yeah, the question I'd like to ask is, they've been living there in the dwelling at the moment. There's a shed and containers there, so they've been living in that at this stage. It's also, I read there's a septic tank there as well. Since they've asked to improve their accommodation there, they've had representations, is that right?
There's no dwelling approved on the site, so there's currently outbuildings,
Right.
which were approved of a residential nature because they weren't able to demonstrate that they were for an agricultural outbuilding at the time. So residential outbuildings for residential storage, so lawn mowers and that type of storage has been approved on the site previously. So that's what they're trying to amend with this application, is to convert those into a dwelling.
Right, so they haven't been living there at all?
I couldn't tell you if they've been living there or not. They don't have permission to live there
Okay.
at this point in time under the existing permits.
Yep, no, thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Wood.
Yeah, just one actually about the, you said that they've been asked, or they weren't able to provide the minimisation or amelioration, and I just wondered if they understood what that would actually entail in regards to the planning scheme, and if they've invested in plans and they've probably got some costs to this point, is there a way that if they can see clearly that this isn't going to go ahead, that we can inform them at an earlier stage of the process around, what's the likely outcome, not that they've put up the costs and then this minimisation amelioration comes in afterwards, or how does that even happen when an applicant comes to?
Yep, so pre-lodgement is always available for any application, and they would be walked through. Rachel? Thank you. Just been informed there have been 2 meetings or discussions held with the applicants in lodging the application, and it was advised that these are the clauses that you have to comply with or demonstrate compliance with, and no guarantee of a permit, and likelihood is also quite difficult given the proximity to quarry. But people are still free to lodge an application and see how they go.
Thank you.
Thank you. No further questions? We've got a recommendation here. Is somebody prepared to move the recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Oldager. Second, Councillor Pleasant. Any further discussion? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. We'll go on to 11.1, the vaping notice. Ashley's going to deal with this one as well?
So yeah, ongoing compliance matter for council for a couple of years now. I think council may have raised the issue themselves with us at some point in time. We've been trying to work with the landowner to rectify some damage to a dwelling that happened due to a fire. Those efforts unfortunately have not resulted in any improvement of the site, and there are ongoing concerns with regards to noise, safety of the structure, and potential for movement getting into the structure as well. So it's gotten to the point where we need to probably take the next step in the enforcement action, requesting permission to seek an abatement, issue an abatement notice to try and have the situation rectified. So that's it. Been trying to work with the landowner as much as we can. We've documented all correspondence to and fro, but unfortunately we haven't succeeded in working well with the landowner. So it's a matter of going to that next step and issuing an abatement notice for the seeking consent to do that.
Thank you very much. Just be prepared to move this. Councillor Rolday?
So move, Mr Mayor.
Second. Councillor Poskett?
Mr Mayor, this is long overdue, this recommendation. This place has been in some disrepair for some considerable amount of time. The date when that fire licence just happens to exclude me, escapes me just at the present time. He's removed most dates, but I can't remember this one. I don't know whether that's a sign of age or anything else, but be careful, sir. It has been in disrepair for some time, and there's been a number of complaints come to each and every one of us for a long period of time, but it's time that it's fixed. All councillors will support.
Councillor Woodward?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, it is disappointing and unfortunate that this has had to happen. And as it says in the report, that it's been visited quite a bit over the last 2 years, and there's been plenty of time for action to be taken, and so it's really responsible for council to sort this issue out. Thank you.
Very good. Any further speakers? For or against? If not, nobody spoke against it, so I will put the recommendation. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. We'll now come down to 11.2, and I'll ask the Deputy Mayor to take control, and I'll move out.
Director of Strategic Governance to things this week. Mr Deputy Mayor, make his way out of the room. So,
Councillors, I have a report before you for consideration of council selling a property it owns at 77 Havelock Street. It's a residential block. Council's owned the land there for quite some period of time. In 2006, it was reconfigured and subdivided into two lots, with one, the large lots being part of an agreement with Rural Health for the respite home, and council's continued to own the residential lot during this time. Discussions to date identify that there's probably not a strategic reason for council continuing to own this residential lot. It's an annual cost to council in owning and holding the lot, and without a strategic reason to hold it, the best option for council would be to put it on the market for interested buyers. So with that, I present the recommendation that the council by absolute majority resolves to go through the sale process. Mr Deputy Mayor.
someone move the recommendation?
Thanks, Mr Deputy Mayor. I would rise to move the recommendation set out before us. It's the right thing to do. It's probably
Sorry,
Deputy Mayor.
continue now.
it is the right thing to do, and then it also helps the council's bottom line. Getting rid of excess properties that you don't use them. All of the council's supported.
Deputy Mayor, I'd just like to support what Councillor Oldacre just was alluding to. I think for our titles that we have got no strategic plan for, now's the time to move those parcels of land, because we are getting the rate of progress, so it's an important time to look at more opportunities like this.
And more speakers for or against? I'll put the motion, all those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Someone grab the mayor, take the seat back.
And Betty.
And me too. Okay.
Okay, we'll be up to 11.3.
Okay.
Oh, councillor Kelly, yes.
See report on that money, the grant money.
Okay, funding allocation now that we're getting from the government, and Daniel is going to take us through this report.
Thanks to you, Mr. Mayor. This report is to do with the $803,241 from the federal government for the Local Roads and Community Infrastructure Fund. Just before I make some comments about the report, I'll note in the printed recommendation I omitted a project on there, about the totals of the four. It's 35,491, which is intended to be allocated to Backline Road footpath construction, which was one of the questions from Rebecca Hawkshaw from public earlier, I believe. So that is intended to be part of the recommendation tonight. Lorraine will have it on the screen after I talk to it. So council, after receiving notification of the funding, had given opportunity through its Facebook page for members of the public to submit ideas for council to consider. So on the 6th of August, council had a workshop to look at those, along with previous projects which had demonstrated strong community support. One of the hard and fast criteria of the funding package was that projects needed to be delivered by 30th of June 2021, which was a determinant in terms of what could council reasonably commit to deliver. On page 93 of the agenda, it is a list of more than 20 different potential projects that were submitted to council. Unfortunately, not all of them involve council infrastructure, so we're not eligible. Some of them involve levels of approval from other infrastructure owners or landowners, where there hadn't previously been a level of project rigour put in. That's by no means to say they're not worthwhile projects, they simply were unlikely to be achieved by that 30th of June 2021 date. The projects in the recommendation in the report, as listed, the Smithton Dog Park, a White Hills Tip Shop infrastructure, Eastern Foreshore exercise equipment renewal and path realignment, Yaggers Road bridge replacement, and the Backline Road footpath construction. So, two of those in particular, the Smithton Dog Park and the White Hills Tip Shop infrastructure, had previously been presented to council by a community-led group demonstrating support and project planning for the dog park, and via the waste strategy and public consultation around for the Tip Shop infrastructure. Others have been contained in asset management plans and have been able to be brought, all of these have been able to be brought forward as a result of the capital funding available. So the report for council consideration is as presented in the agenda.
Just one thing I'd like to add with the Backline Road, we did state that if there was any further funding over from the other projects, because we believe the dog park will get some, people will be donating some time or money, which will make that cheaper. And we're hopeful that the 35,000 will be higher than that, which will mean we'll be able to do more at Backline Road if that's the case. So
Stick that all in the minutes so that we're aware of that was the decision of council. Thanks, Daniel. Somebody prepared to move the recommendation?
Certainly move the recommendation.
I'm surprised.
Mr Mayor, that's certainly worthy.
We've got to get a second.
Yeah, I'll second Mr.
Thanks.
Metcalf.
They're certainly worthy projects for our community, and it's good to see that funding going to projects that are worthy of our community. And I'll just hone in on the Off-Lead dog park area. That's a project that's been very well supported in our community, and it has been supported well in the last 2 years. And so it's great to see this project getting support. There has been quite a few people involved in a group that we met earlier, and as our mayor said, that there's been offers of construction and offers of material to help this dog park area. So I'll certainly recommend this. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I concur with Councillor Woody, but also, as Daniel mentioned, the workshop through and the projects picked out are ready, completable by the time, and I've used to the community in 2 or 3 different areas. So, I'll ask for support as well.
Deputy Mayor, and then Councillor Rattler.
I'm standing to support the motion as well. I know there were some disappointed people with some other stuff that didn't get through, but having the ones ready to go was our main focus. Otherwise, they wouldn't have got done in time. People need to be aware of that. That was the main reason why some of these other projects didn't get up. So I'm going to support the recommendation before us.
Councillor Rattler.
Yeah, I'd just like to again commend the team that had the background work completed, which actually allowed us to get such a good amount, and that's Scott and his team with the roads. And so the work that they've done with the documentation and the strategy in the pipeline allowed us to get so much. And I'd also like to encourage community members like Stanley and some of the other groups that came forward this time with projects that fit within the criteria. And although it didn't, we have to have these ones done by June next year, and so some of the things in the pipeline got up. I think it's really important that the community work with us to let us know where those areas are that we can improve. So again, thank you to those who had the work done, and that it was already completed for us all to benefit from this.
Anything further? I'd just like to reiterate what Councillor Rattler said about our staff, and I think Daniel and his team did a fantastic job. We got more money than any other council on the North West Coast in this at this time, and there are a number of councils that are much bigger than our council, so it's really good from our staff, and well done to everybody that worked hard to put this together so that we could actually achieve it, so well done. Okay, nobody spoke against the project, so I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. 11.5, draft public art policy report.
11.4, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, that's right, because I 11.4. I've got 11.3. The audit panel charter. And
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Council has an audit panel and an audit panel charter that governs how they operate. We recently, within the last 12 months, we amended it to align it to the government guidelines, but there's been a recent minor change made by the Waratah Wynyard Council to their audit panel charter, and as we share the same audit panel, it just made sense to align ours with theirs. So that was to allow for a 4th independent member, to move the remuneration details into an appendix so that they can be updated administratively, and to increase the charter review period from 2 to 3 years so that we align at the same time. So for that, I present the recommendation to adopt.
Thanks, Matthew. Somebody prepared to move the recommendation? Yes. Do you want to ask a question first?
Yeah, just one quick question. The remuneration charter that will be moved to the appendix for administration purposes, that doesn't mean that it can be updated without the due processes.
No, it's basically to write the values that match so it says CPI at a particular time in the charter.
Yeah.
So then at the time that CPI is calculated each year, it can be populated in the appendix. So it doesn't change the amount.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I've got a question. Can someone explain to me why we need a fourth independent member and with financial implications?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the option is for a fourth independent member to be appointed, and the circumstance might be where there's a transition of members. You might bring a fourth member on, for example, for a period of time while another one transitions out, or there may be discussions about having a fourth. So it doesn't mean a fourth is automatically appointed, it means there is an option of having a fourth. So council could determine, as has done in the past with Waratah, that there was a period of time we had an additional member on for our panel meetings than the Waratah Council did. So it just provides that flexibility.
And financial implications?
There would be, if there was a fourth member appointed, yes.
That would depend whether it was a council member or an independent person. If it's a council member, I know you was on there at one stage as a fourth member here, but would have been paid because we did an allowance as a councillor, but if it was an independent. And I see that if there was somebody that intended to retire within 6 months, they may say it would be a good idea to have another person there for a short period of time, just so that they get used to the work that they do. And that's the only reason. It's not intended to be 4 members all the time. It's only just for a short period of time while we're going from one to another.
Well, Mr. Mayor, if I may, if we have got a fourth member, I can't see why we've got to follow. They now have a member nominated.
They haven't got a fourth member.
Sorry, well, they've got the option of a fourth member. If we see one retiring, we'll appoint a fourth member that we'll be able to pick up pretty quick. I can't see the reason why we need to put this down and we can make a fourth member as soon as we know about it.
We have the same membership as Wynyard, unless we put a councillor from here on it. And so if Wynyard had a fourth person, they would be in the house as well. So it's basically just putting it so that our rules are the same as Wynyard, so that we can all get in the same way. As I understand it. Correct.
Yeah, also had the King Island sheds. But yeah, there is only 3 members and only intention to have 3 members at this point in time, but the option is available.
Deputy Mayor, you're going to second it? Thank you. Have I got a movement, rather? Are you going to, have I got a second? Councillor Shade. Any further discussion required? No further discussion, I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against?
Yes.
Councillor Plosky's against. Everybody else for it? That is carried. Well, now I'll go on to 11.5, which is their art policy report.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Councillors, the purpose of this report is to seek Council's endorsement to ask the public comment on the draft public art policy and the draft guidelines and the draft advisory group operating procedures. The draft public art policy covers all permanent, integrated or temporary artwork in public spaces that's either commissioned by or in partnership with Circular Council. The draft policy and associated guidelines and procedures will provide a framework to enable Council to contribute, support and promote public art to reflect and enhance Circular Head's cultural identity and enrich cultural life. The guidelines cover the roles and responsibilities and procedures required to implement the policy.
The guidelines also identify that an advisory group be established as a review mechanism to make recommendations to council on artwork that may be commissioned. The procedures for the group include their objectives, the membership and the operating functions. The draft policy and associated draft documents were presented to council's workshop on the 9th of July 2020. Public art can create a unique community identity that informs or enhances a sense of place and can generate iconic branding for the area. Developing a public art policy is a positive step to ensure council has direction associated with identifying and installing public art throughout the community. Councillors, I present the draft public art report and associated documents for you to consider.
Thank you. Any questions for Steve? If not, is somebody prepared to move the recommendation?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor McCloskey, seconded Councillor Redland. Any discussion required?
Just one question, sir. What's the time that this will be laid out for public for comment?
Through you, Mr Mayor, it'll be 21 days, Councillor Popowski.
Can we have that extended?
You certainly can.
Because I reckon, I'd like to see it extended because, and a good media coverage to be able to get engagement from the community.
That was my question. How are we going to communicate that? What channels are we going to use? And could we use some videos or some 2610 funding to get that really connecting with people?
I'm not sure about the 26 funding there, Councillor Edwin, but we're certainly going to develop a communication strategy so that we certainly cover all our community to inform them and provide the documents for the comments. So more than happy to extend the consultation period.
Councillor Aldo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Prosky, extending your, put in how many days, I think probably need to put a number in there, you know, in your indulgence, is you want to add to the recommendation, that it'd be 42 days, given we've got all this forest things about it. And that gives everybody plenty of time.
Are you happy with that, Councillor McCloskey?
I think that's a great idea, and especially with our opportunity to come in, especially 22 days with our opportunity to get the word out there through the art of our town during September.
So, Councillor Redland, you're happy with 42 days?
Sure.
Yep. I agree with Deb with 2610. I think that's a really good idea. It would have been brilliant, but I don't think in the next month we'll be able to get that done at the time we put an application in and got it. If we were able to get it, we just wouldn't get it in the time, but I think...
I can certainly follow that.
Yeah, it'd be worth giving Searle one of them down to 2610 a call to see whether it could happen, and if it can, well it would be worth trying. Any further discussion, debate? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now down to 11.6, which is our financial report.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, before you we have the financial reports for the period ending 31st of July 2020. And on the second page, or the third page there, we've received one application for the first homeowners grant for July. We also have the closing funds available for the special committees, which are listed there on page 1.4. We have the comprehensive income statement with a current surplus of 7.9 million at this point in time, and that's because we raise our rates at the first day of the financial year, compared to budget of a loss of 1.1 million for the year.
Excuse me, can I ask a question while you're on that page? And it says actual for 2021 is 8,600. Obviously, something to do with rates, but why do we put that in before we receive it?
because we have an outstanding debtor on the balance sheet. So we've got a receivable on the balance sheet, which if you go on to the next page, it's the second figure down, so receivables are at 9.5 million. So that's how, in terms of accounting, the double entry bookkeeping that we do on an accruals basis. So that's why that's there.
Just one, I couldn't work out how we had all this money so quick, I thought, my goodness, good.
Yeah. So total community equity we've got is around $235 million. Just to make a comment there, in terms of the discussion earlier on in the night around Taswater, at 30th of June, we equity account for our investment, our 1.55% share of Taswater investment. Last year, that was $29 million that we had recorded on our balance sheet. With the write down of that assets, it's actually come down to 22. So actually, you'll see when our annual report comes out that we've actually recorded what's called a below the line loss of nearly $7 million regarding that actual Taswater investment as well too. So the only thing that it really impacts in terms of sort of our financials is actually our financial ratios. So when you're looking at total assets, the value of that's actually dropped overall. So just to be mindful. We've got the call and fixed term deposits on the bottom of page 125, 126. The cash at bank is 11.2 million, including operating investments, and the receivables balance, as said before, on page 128 is 9.5 million, which 9 million of that is made up of rates outstanding, carried forward from last year and what we've raised this year, which is not, so we've collected 3.79% in the first month. That's what that's telling us there. We've got sundry debtors outstanding of 355 with only 35,000 in 60 plus days. And we have the cash graph, which is a comparison of the last 3 years. So we've submitted our financial statements on the 14th, last Friday the 14th, to keep with our statutory deadline of 45 days after the end of 30th of June. Tas Audit Office have not been lenient at all, or the local government office, in terms of auditing dates. So even with COVID circumstances, we still need to be signed off by the 30th of September. So here thinking that we're probably going to be audited at the end of September. The auditors are actually going to be here for 4 days next week, so we'll be going through that with all the staff downstairs. So we have a positive outcome from that and be signed off by the 30th of September. I'll present the report for Council's consideration, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Any questions?
Councillor Woodward? Yes, I'd like to Rachel, please. Would you have the numbers that apply to the first home owners for the last 12 months? And do you think that's out there for people to know about this?
Yeah, through you, Mr Mayor. We contact, probably about every 12 or 18 months, we get in contact with the real estate agents and the lawyers as well. So we talk about it here at this forum a lot. So so the more people that be engaged in this form of discussion now that we're live stream would be great too. But yeah, in terms of people going through the buying process, generally a real estate and or a lawyer in that process are there to remind people that that is available for first home owners in Circular Head. So yeah, so we try to do as much as we can in that space in terms of contact with people that will have contact with first home buyers. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Adler.
I just wanted to ask, with that $7 million write-down, $7 million write-down from Taswater, when you say that affects our financial ratios, what are the triggers that will be set for us that should send any bills for us? And is there a link with our depreciation for that?
Yeah, no, there's no depreciation linkers. So depreciation is what they call an above the line, which looks at your operating surplus as in normal operations, and this is sort of below the line, which is like the old extraordinary items. So it's one of those. What was the first question? Sorry, again.
Well, are there any triggers with those financial ratios? What are our sort of comfortable where we sit comfortably, and are we close to that, or?
Yeah, and that's
what
probably
does that
where
affect?
looking at our long-term financial plan again, the council's going to look at budget again in, October, November. So we can have a look at those ratios there after we've done the 30th of June. So that's been done and audited. By the time we look at that, we'll be able to have a look at those ratios then and actually see, what impact that will have. Yeah.
And can I suggest maybe for the first homeowners that we do a visual or a short video again for, just to get it out in the people know, as another method of letting people know.
Mr Mayor, is that something councillors would want to do?
Yeah, I think we ought to be doing it. Yeah, council should do it.
If council want to do a video, we can organise that if that would be good promoting the policy.
Yeah, we could have a couple of councillors saying a little bit about it, which would be, we'll probably get, councillor Wise Harris to do some of that, being our youngest person. But, because it is primarily, not primarily, because some older people could be first-time buyers as well, but younger people are probably more likely to be first-time buyers, and so, why not use our people that are young?
No, you have to take that on board, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. I'm sure Joe will help you put something together. Councillor
Some time ago, last year when we was talking about budget, Councillor Iveris brought up a good point that, and I agree with him, that we should be splitting, as on page 126, we should be splitting materials and contractors. Is there any work being done to make that possible?
I'm not sure of the question, Mr Mayor, can you?
The question is to be able to split the expenses on materials and contractors, so lumped together.
That's
And
just
we'd
how
like
it
to
is.
see those separate to be able to see improvements and efficiencies and.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, this is just the recommended, presentation of the financial statements according to accounting standards. But if the elected members want further breakdown, then we can definitely do that. And the quarterly reports probably give you a little bit, probably too much detail. So it's somewhere in the middle that you're probably looking for. So yes, we do that, and our financial statements, our annual financial statements, they are actually broken down. Materials and contracts has got a list of about 20 different items that it's made up in and that you can compare to last year as well too.
Can we workshop something down those things to see what's suitable? I thought the idea from the council was right. It gives them a better hand.
Yeah, we can start, Mr Mayor, I suppose working out a time frame for that with our other priorities is another thing. But definitely we can do breakdowns out of the system depending on what you like, so.
Thank you.
Anything further? Can I have somebody move the recommendation? Thank you, councillor Ives Harris and councillor Woodward. No further discussion, debate, I'll put the motion, all those in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. 11-7.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Senior Management Report is presented there for council's information. I'll just touch on some of the items. You'll notice that there's a recommendation there to confirm 10th of December as our ordinary meeting for December. There was arrangements there as in relation to council's closure over the Christmas break, looking to ensure the team leverages summer, taking some of that leave and supporting the economy within the state. You'll notice there that there's some advice in relation to the Henry Helier Reserve in Stanton. Community small grants for all those that are online and in the gallery tonight. They close on Monday the 31st of August. It's a great opportunity to get some inspiration from community in terms of those particular projects that they're interested in, particularly around mental health and wellbeing. There's some notes there in relation to the social recovery team and the work that's been occurring in that space. Dare I say it's a watching brief, given the events that are unfolding in Victoria. There's some advice there in relation to the Balance Walk This Way initiative. Only 1,000 kilometres have been walked. That's almost a home and back. So that's a very good outcome for the community. The Charts Festival theme is Home for 2020. The one that's recently been running this week, it still is, Science Week, in terms of the science kit. Really good participation, and there's been a number of suggestions made in terms of continuing those videos and virtual tours of industry, given that it's often very difficult to actually expose people to what goes on behind the scenes in certain places. In the youth space, video chat and connections is continuing, chill programs running there, and 7up, noted in the agenda, is that they're having some difficulties accessing the building, but that's been resolved, and essentially they met this time for the first time for a number of weeks post-COVID. In terms of recreation, council facilities have been reopening, junior basketball, netball and hockey. Great to see progress there. The Smithton Wellbeing and Indoor Recreation and Leisure Centre, it's actually Movement is Medicine program. I encourage everybody to share that as much around the place. Emergency management, bushfire assessment, work has been continuing, given that we've had good rainfalls, and if we get a dry summer, maybe fuels in that space. And there's a number of dot points there in relation to items for tourism. I would encourage everybody to support Stanley as the local district's nomination in Tassie's top tourist town. And I present the report for council's consideration.
Thank you. Is there any questions to our General Manager? Councillor Olver.
Mr Mayor, I understand that both Stanley Tourism and Top Town closes tomorrow. So it's closed on.
That's correct.
Mr Mayor, I note in the correspondence laid on the table, we've got requests for support for a couple of sporting teams. When will we be workshopping and discussing that support?
I'll talk to Deb, and they can look at it with their team and come back to us shortly.
What's confusing for me, sir, is some teams are negotiating with their area management teams and controlling bodies. For example, I would have thought the netball would have went to the outdoor committee, indoor committee, plus all this to council. And we haven't had any discussion on what support we should do. There's an opportunity to get some buy-in, even though they may not be using the facilities. We're not an open checkbook for these things, and maybe there's some chance of community contribution in lieu of some dollars. And I'd like to see what's happening right around the district to get a uniform process so that we can, everyone knows where we stand.
I talked to Deb about it this afternoon, and I agree with it. And I know that some groups have been given some relief, and I said to Deb, we need to give the same relief to all teams, not just one team. And so I know Deb's going to do some more work with it and come back to us, let us know what that is.
Well, my point, also, I'm grateful to hear what you're saying. We are in deficit mode too, through fraudulent frugal budgeting over many years, and idiot man in financial over there, we've had some saving up, and we're using that money this year. I don't believe we can just hand out money without some return. And I see these sporting teams as a good opportunity to say, yes, we can help, but we also need help at times. An example could be that instead of, for how many dollars we give them, say $20 an hour could be an hour given back to contribution. And I know, Mr Mayor, you're getting on a little bit more in years and struggle around places like the Twilight on the Duck. And it'd be good to get these people who've got money off us to come in and support from those days. And that's the kind of thing, a bit of buyback by community. And we're just on an open checkbook all the time. And that's what my theory is, and others can disagree, but I think we've got to start in small steps. We might change Australia if enough people look at us and say, well, it's a bit It's not all one way.
I agree with that. I just think we need to be fair to each team and not give one team something and then another team something else. We need to give them the same. And we can't just give everything that they want, and there's some things that's in those lessons that we shouldn't be doing, and the staff's well aware of that, and they are going to look at it all and then come back to us. Probably in a workshop, sure.
Yeah.
Mr Mayor, I'd just like to, on page 183, just commend the council on obtaining the grant for the Greenpoint Road safety barrier. As I live down those parts and actively use that road, I think it's important for that barrier to be there and continue to provide funding for a dangerous stretch of road like Greenpoint Road. I will add though, after a few signs have gone up throughout the week and a bit of community backlash, that it's not 100 kilometres an hour, it's actually 60. So you'll see that pretty evident with the signage that's been displayed during last week.
Thank you. Anything else, Councillor?
Just that it is indeed welcome news that the Milkshake Hills boardwalk will be upgraded, and I look forward to enjoying that after in September when it reopens and the school holidays might be.
Anything else, councillors? Somebody prepared to move the recommendation?
So moved, Mr Mayor.
Secretary Mayor and Councillor Kay. I put the recommendation, all those in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. 11.8, and there's two lots of minutes there for Second Recreation Advisory Committee. Somebody prepared to move that?
Don't move.
Councillor Wood?
Second, Mr Mayor.
Deputy Mayor, any questions on that?
Mr Mayor, I noticed in the minutes there was concerns with you talking about what's the future. I was wondering if it's time that councillors could ask the Rec Advisory Committee, which was set up to advise the councillors on things being outdoor or recreation, if they could do a review into where we sit with our area management committees and the combining or separating of committees to run our outdoor sporting facilities.
Yeah, I think we probably ought to have a workshop on it. If we talk about it in the workshop, we'll be the best thing first, and then we can.
Well, it's been raised in the minutes that they were worried about working through three committees and different things like that. And it might be a time, I'm quite happy to get a review, or suggest we get a review from the Rec Advisory Committee for what it was set up for, and come back and then we workshop it, or would you rather go the other way?
What was discussed and was, you're right, I mean, if you want to have an event that's outside and inside, you have to talk to the outside committee, the inside committee, and then maybe council as well, because Deb's got to do that for the insurance or whatever. And so it was suggested that we probably try to look at somebody from council would be the best person to get in contact. And so that one person could check on the inside and outside, make sure there was nothing on, rather than the user have to go to three different bodies. That's what we talked about there, but if we want to do anything different than that, well, we can do it, but I'm pretty confident that's what we discussed, wasn't it?
Yeah, through you, that's correct, and probably too, looking at, as we have deferred the reviewing the fees and charges and everything, so we have also discussed reviewing of the fees and charges, so whether or not we can do that all in one package, the fees and charges, licences and leases, as well as the structure, the review of the structure of our area management committees to make it probably far more easier for our users as well. So that's all in the pipeline.
Can we put insurance in that group? The layers of insurance, I know it's been an ongoing thing for the last 30 years, but is it time to try and be able to streamline the insurances and the inputs from the teams? It's something to put there as a note.
You certainly take that on board, councillor Koski, but every club that is now required to have insurance, as well as council has insurance, and yes, I understand it seems a bit like double, but that's the regulation, so that's sort of something we can't change in those aspects.
Councillor Roden?
I think that it's a great idea that we do look into that. We've got a growing cost base of all our ovals and all our facilities, and if we're looking at the demographic change, we're going to have a declining volunteer base. So if we do look at that, we need to do it with a little bit of strategy and understand where the needs are. We might have to revisit that as a community, what we can support. Thanks.
Okay, that will take a bit of work, but that can be done, and so, yeah, we need to start somewhere. Anything further on the Circular Recreation Advisory 2 meetings? If not, I'll put the recommendation, all those in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. Go down to 11.9, Circular Head Education and Training Consultative Committee. Happy to move that, Councillor Redmond?
Yes, and I've got a question as well.
Okay, somebody second that? Thanks, Councillor Olwager. Yep,
There's been a set of, well, we've actually had a meeting since then, and at this month's CHEDIC meeting, it was discovered that despite various training funds being made available currently across the state, Circular Head is facing a shortage of training and training coordination. And could we invite the Minister to help support training issues, including access to non-compete funding registered training organisations, a skills advisory council so that the industry can have input into some of the training that's being designed, and the training and assessment qualification of TAE, how we can get some more of those qualified people into our district so that we can access them. I think a visit from the Minister would certainly help put these issues to the forefront at a time where training funds are supposedly available, yet we can't seem to access them because of our lack of trainers. Thank you.
so, yeah, we could write to the Minister as the Deputy Chairman and see whether we can get a meeting with him on those subjects. Do you want to send that from CHEDIC or do you want to send it from here?
I think CHEDIC would like to be involved, but obviously the existing relationships would be important to see what you think is the best outcome for Circular Head.
Thank you. No, we can do that. Anything further on CHEDIC, councillors? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. 11.10, which is Western Area Management Committee. So moved. Thank you, and that's got an AGM too, so.
Yes, it is.
The, we need to go on that as well. Thank you, second for that? Second. The discussion? Debate?
Mr Mayor, I'd like to, the third point in the minutes, business arising, it's no doubt that we said at this table after a question I asked, the trees replacement were part of the project and there was money there to do it, so I backed up the two councillors that was attending and I thought we could get those trees in the plan.
Yep. That's fine. Thank you. Any further? I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. We go down to 11, and this one here has got an annual meeting too, so we need to note the annual meeting results of that. Somebody prepared to move that?
So, Mr Mayor.
Deputy Mayor, seconded.
Yes,
Councillor Kay. Again, is there any debate or discussion? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. 11.12, Circular Community Road Safety Partnership. Minutes of the meeting on the 20th of July.
So moved.
Thanks, Councillor Lawrence Harris. Second by Councillor Woodward. Any discussion?
Question.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if this group can have any input in it, but I'll ask it anyway. There's quite a backlog for young drivers trying to get their keys. And I wondered if this group could do anything to discuss with state growth, or if that might be a platform where we could get a bit of a push along, because COVID's pushed that back and we're still going to face that same issue.
Councillor Ives Harris will take that.
I'll take it on those, thanks Mr Mayor, but I know CHAP, they're actively involved in our district, and no doubt with a bit of push, hopefully we can get something through state growth, because I think it is an important aspect to have trained drivers going on our rural roads, considering we've got all types of roads and terrains.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr
Councillor
Mayor. In regards to the near miss out at Yans Road at Rocky Cape, has any of our councillor officers or you have been out to investigate this area where the school is?
Daniel's got hot off the press.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Yeah, look, certainly, I've been having a look at that one closer. Had discussion as late as just before the meeting today, just to make sure that's been looked at as part of the highway package of works. With a couple of pieces of information to forward on to the DSG officers, including costings for potentially looking at widening of the Andro Bridge and other things to open up that junction there where it's a bit tight for larger vehicles. So that's the latest put to DSG as a result of that in this.
And also, did you investigate the Crayfish Creek area as well, where the school buses, that's been a notorious spot there for so many years, not just with school buses, but all high volume traffic?
Yeah, through you again, Mr Mayor, I believe that one's part of the highway corridor also.
That was high on the list. I know when we put it through last year, and so I'd be disappointed if that wasn't done this summer.
You need to keep on to that.
Mr. Yans Road, line of sight's a problem too, isn't it? Towards the east.
Potentially, look, from looking at the details around the near miss, one of the geometry constraints that appeared to be the turn into Yans Road being too tight, and then with the narrow bridge just inside would make it difficult for a heavy vehicle to turn easily.
Through you, Mr Mayor, if Daniel wouldn't mind sharing the information that he shared with me tonight on speed reduction. He's been working very hard on that. Thanks, Daniel.
Yeah, thanks again for you, Mr Mayor. There's been strong sentiment from the council table backed by community concerns to see a reduced speed limit through there. The initial response back was that the first pass was that it's not backed by strong accident history. However, I've been able to get further hearing, if you like, that they're going to go back and look at that further in terms of preventative measures, so look at it from a road safety point of view, not just on past accident statistics.
Thank you. He finally got tough with them.
Thank you. Well, it was high on our list last year. I can't understand that it's continue to work through.
Thank you.
Anything further on the minutes of the meeting? If not, I do have a mover and seconder. Do I not?
I'll move it.
That's already been done. I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against carried. We're down now to 12 for the second lot of public questions. Are there any further questions from the public?
I just have a question in regards to the LRCI funding. I was just reading what things come under the guidelines, and I was wondering, could you explain to me how the White Hills tip shop infrastructure comes under that, or what in regards? Because it says bicycles, walking paths, planting, improvement to community facilities, repairing and replacement, but just don't understand where the White Hills tip shop infrastructure fits into that.
Could you help us out with that, Mr. Take any notice or
Daniel might be able to help.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Look, the commentary in the report there, those dot points give examples of potential infrastructure, but the guidelines are actually quite broad. It's perhaps more useful to look at what it doesn't fund.
I did actually read them when you put them up last time.
Sure.
I was just wondering if you might mean a specific area under the last one.
Alright, do so if you give me a moment.
My understanding with them all, we all have to, now we've moved and seconded the motion and got through. It's got to go to the department and I've got to tick it off before we get the money. So we haven't got the money until it's ticked off by the department. If any of them don't qualify, we'll need to come back and spend it on something else. So that does have to happen, but.
You know, I don't disagree with it, I think.
Yeah, no.
Ticks off would be great for the community,
But it does have
also
to.
wonder for the $350,000 with all the issues we've done. Like we could have some closed circuit CCTV or some more paintings or improvements to community facilities.
But they do have to go on, and if they don't qualify, we'll come back and we'll have to relook at it.
That's absolutely right. So the motion was to put them to the federal government and they'll give a response within a number of weeks. If they find that it's not within those guidelines, they'll certainly give us that response.
So what cover the guidelines?
I'll take it on notice if that's okay, rather than hold the meeting.
Yeah.
Through you, Mr Mayor, for your benefit there, Melissa, you'll notice on page 3 of that particular report, it goes through ineligible funding receipts cannot be used grant money to pay for business or usual activities. Community public art was unfortunately excluded. That's the last dot point. Road rehabilitation studies, transport planning studies.
Yeah, I just read it.
Yeah. Those particular things, unfortunately were excluded because they weren't considered as part of that particular suite of funding that the federal government was supporting.
What is that comment in relation to?
Well, in terms of they were the ineligibility criteria, and that's what we had to work with. We couldn't use the funding for those particular aspects.
Oh, I'm just going with what it says here. These projects must deliver benefits to the community such as improved accessibility, visual amenity and or safety. Examples of eligible works include closed circuit CCTV, bicycle and walking paths, painting and improvements to community. So I was just using that as an example. I wasn't making it specific.
Might offer a clarifying question. Look, it's local roads and community infrastructure, so it's, I guess, read as intended to be roads related. I don't believe that's the intent of the fund. So, yeah.
So you will send me a letter with that?
Sure.
Thank you. Any further questions?
G'day, my name's Isaac Koski. When Swirl was built, 2 of the squash courts were demolished to make space for a multi-purpose indoor recreation space. When Swirl was under development, there were already multiple indoor recreation spaces available as private enterprises elsewhere on this circular head. Why was this space necessary to include at the cost of existing indoor exercise infrastructure as the squash courts in their current form, and why couldn't it have existed elsewhere?
So are you two gentlemen going to have a look at that, or do we want to take it on notice?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I think it's been well documented through the process that we went through to build a community wellbeing centre. Part of that was to include exercise program spaces. That was in the public documents that were put out in the community consultation when we first went to the community, when we did the open space planning and recreation. I know a number of businesses during the period of that project that we started on that journey have since opened during the time that we were planning that project, but that was been in the plan since 2016-17, so yeah.
Okay, yeah, so more of those spaces have opened since the...
So a number of those have opened in the time.
Yes. Yeah, okay, cool. My second question was, since Swirl has opened, the facility's kind of essentially become the gatekeeper of the squash courts, which makes it difficult to utilise the facility outside of Swirl's opening hours. Is there any way or reason this facility can't be put in the same, I guess, zone as the basketball stadium and access through the stadium as it used to be when it was a standalone facility?
Sure. Through you, Mr Mayor, with COVID restrictions, a bit like 24/7 gyms, you can't just have single person access like you may be used to.
Yeah.
I know for our recreation side, we're working with some people who are interested in establishing a user agreement to get access to the squash courts and have a club or the like that would actually take responsibility. But at the moment, it's only accessible during opening hours or by having a particular agreement.
Because it's kind of like a transition.
Yep, and I should say, for a period of time, we haven't been able to have the squash courts open because of the ventilation issues that we had, so it's only been pretty much, that was fixed at the beginning of COVID, so it's really only been the last couple of months that we've been able to have them back open.
Okay, it's just still a new issue, but it's still the teething issues. Do have one more question?
Yeah, I'll have one more.
Cool. At Godfrey Speaks, there are signs detailing conditions surrounding leashed and unleashed dogs, but you can't see them until you're actually on the beach. The signs give a couple of the rules to do with different conditions applying to your dogs, and a lot of them are around daylight savings time, so I think there's I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think from 10 to 7 they have to be on the leash, or something like that. Would it be possible just to get another sign at the top of the beach before you're actually down in the beach, so if you're already doing something wrong, you know, kind of breaking the rule before you find out it's there?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we do have the dog policy coming up for review by council fairly soon, including on-leash or off-leash areas, and no doubt that will include matters such as signage, visibility, how well placed they are, and all of those matters.
Yeah, cool. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any further questions from anybody? If not, I need a motion that council resolve by absolute majority that matters listed below be considered in committee.
Yes, sir.
Councillor Woodward and Councillor Abbott. The recommendation, all those in favour?
Aye.
Against carried. Another one, that council resolve by absolute majority to close the meeting to the public.
So moved.
Thanks, Councillor Ives and Councillor Woodward. Put the motion, all those in favour?
Aye.
Against carried. I want to thank everybody in the gallery for coming tonight, and also those online. Thank you very much for listening in.
Thank you.